think everybody's here. Who are we missing?
Oh, great.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's it.
Super.
Cool.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to call the February 2nd, 2023, typo on our agenda, I think, meeting to order.
Does it say
Okay.
2022?
It's only February. Yeah, it says 2022. And this being our first meeting of the month is our planning meeting with a focus on the Plan of Conservation and Development updates that we're working on. So I thought we'd jump right in. Aaron Mannix, our town planner, and John Guskowski, our special consultant for the Plan of Conservation and Development update, are here to share with us recent drafts and open it up to discussion.
And Steve Natick is here as well.
Oh, great. Thank you. Sorry, I don't have everybody in my gallery.
Yes. Steve's responsible for our introduction draft. So
and current zoning enforcement as well.
that's right. Steve
And
is
filling in. Yeah,
I'm getting to know Madison very well.
perfect. We like that.
he's my eyes in the field these days. Wonderful.
So
Okay, John, do you want to kick it off? Do you want me to? What?
you go ahead. You've got the floor.
Okay, so we did share today 2 updates. As we left our last meeting, we went over our outline and our vision and our vision statement and our mission statement, and made some suggestions, and John took those back and made some edits, as well as expanded upon the themes that we discussed that we were hoping to carry throughout each of our items, in our built and natural environment, and how we can incorporate this continuous theme throughout the plan. So I can screen share that if you want to get started on that part, discussing it. I'm not sure if everybody had an opportunity to read that, but we can go through it this evening if you'd like.
That'd be great.
Okay, so.
So Aaron, I didn't know if you want to actually screen share first, or if you want me to screen share the outline, so we sort of have the agreed upon outline, just to kind of reorient people to where we were in that process.
Sure. Do you have it right up?
I do.
Sure. You can go ahead and screen share it. Otherwise, I'm on multiple computers here.
Yeah. Okay. So can people see this?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this was sort of our sort of consensus working draft of the outline, with our executive summary, and thanks to Chairman Snow's artistry with words, we've sort of agreed upon a couple of paired themes for the Madison POCD of we're up here: vitality and connectivity, resilience and sustainability, and opportunity and growth. And as Aaron said, those will ideally be woven through the substantive chapters. And so what we're focusing on today is we had started with the vision statement right here under 2, and we have kind of reached consensus on that for now. And so what we added were a little discussion of the overarching goals and themes, and so this sort of describes the community vision and plan goals. And then we also did some work in the introduction section up here on the basics. What is a POCD? Why do we do this? What's the statutory basis? And a little bit of the demographics. So so that's just to ground us in what we were talking about today. I'll bring over, and Steve's going to talk about some of the introductory stuff. I'll talk about sort of what is admittedly and hopefully the most flowery frou-frou language that we'll have in the Plan of Conservation and Development, and then we'll get down to brass tacks shortly. But so the vision statement here, we've talked about it for a couple of months, and I think we've reached a fair bit of consensus on. And we drop in some of those words about vital, connected, resilient, sustainable, with opportunities for growth. And then, so what we wanted to do is then sort of break out and explain the connective tissue between the broad vision and then what we're going to be seeing in the plan to identify each of the broad themes of vitality and connectivity, resilience and sustainability, and opportunity and growth as they were paired. There's both a lot of words there and also a lot of room for possible wordsmithing. I don't know if we just want to go ahead and read it. It's just, it's about a page, or jump into a discussion if people have gotten a chance to read it. That's up to you, Madam Chair.
I did have a chance to read it, and if people have not had a chance to read it, though, maybe it would be good to go ahead and just read through it out loud, if that's okay with everyone.
It's fine with me, even though I did read it. I wouldn't mind hearing it. Sure.
Okay. All right. I'll try to be brisk and clear.
Articulate.
So core themes of the Plan of Conservation and Development. When identifying goals and recommended actions within a long-range planning document like a POCD, the general topics such as housing, transportation, economic development, etc., can very quickly get into the weeds of fine detail, bus stops along certain roads, housing lot sizes, in a way that can seem disconnected. Further, there may not be any evident connection between the detailed recommendation and the plan's vision. In an effort to facilitate both decision-making on priorities and to weave common threads throughout each of the topical areas, this plan has identified 6 paired themes that will guide each detailed goal and recommendation. Drawn from the vision statement, these core themes are vitality and connectivity, resilience and sustainability, and opportunity and growth. Vitality and connectivity. A community's vitality is a subjective, intangible quality that's nevertheless perfectly clear to residents and visitors that experience it. Community engagement in public celebrations and events, a wide variety of civic, recreational, and commercial activities that attract participation from across the demographic and cultural spectrum, a thriving school system, economic activity, and engaged government and business community all contribute to the vitality of a community. Connectivity can describe both the physical and figurative bonds that knit together a community. The town is connected physically through its system of roads, sidewalks, and trail systems. It's connected through the water, telephone, cable, and data infrastructure running underneath and above our streets. It's connected through the civic and educational institutions that formally engage with the residents and students of Madison. It is also connected just as significantly through less formal social networks, both on and offline, where cultural information is shared, distributed, and reinforced. They are the systems, physical, virtual, and cultural, that allow people to be a part of Madison. Resilience and sustainability. Just as connectivity has both tangible and symbolic meaning, so too can resilience. In an organizational and structural sense, resilience refers to the reality that natural hazards such as storm intensity and frequency, drought, flooding, and coastal inundation are all likely to be increasingly exacerbated by global climate changes.
Typo, likely to be.
Where am I? Or likely, thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, land, property, and infrastructure that was relatively safe from storms 10 years ago will likely be less so over the next 10. The town must consider investments and land use decisions thinking about, I'm not sure about this phrase, thinking about planning for a reimagined worst case scenario and spend more resources in planning for recovery. This means not only decisions about where and how to build, but also the systems to escape, retreat, and recover when that is needed. More metaphorically, the community must strengthen its relationships and communication systems so the community can work together in preparing for and recovering from a wide variety of challenges. I'm just going to highlight this. I don't like that phrasing. Sustainability is often misused as a synonym for resilience, but it defines something well beyond simple preparedness for recovery. Sustainability is the ability of a community to provide for the needs of the current generation without sacrificing the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. It uses a triple bottom line of analysis to ensure a balance between the necessary economic growth, social equity, and environmental stewardship. Decisions about municipal growth and investment should seek to satisfy each of the central considerations. Opportunity and growth. Opportunity is about openness and continuity. Madison is a great community in which to live, work, shop, learn, and play. It should strive to provide the chance for all of its residents, workers, and visitors to engage with these resources as freely as possible. Opportunity extends to the possibility of finding suitable and affordable housing, quality education, a clean and safe environment in which to raise a family, a variety of good employment options, and a freedom of movement to interact with the community. Providing opportunities includes removal of structural and regulatory barriers, proactive investment in community assets, and protection of critical resources. While there is a reasonable temptation to seek to preserve and protect the character of Madison in a way that resists significant change, some level of change over time is inevitable and growth is essential. While large-scale economic and market forces are largely out of the control of a small town, a community can both encourage and regulate growth in directions and at a rate that fit the capacity of the town's resources. Being thoughtful about these processes can motivate appropriate growth. So that was a mouthful, and thank you for it's useful to read through. There is some awkward language in there, but I'll shut up now and let people react.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and jump right in as someone who read through it already. And I think it is good to actually read it out loud because you do pick up things that you might not have caught otherwise. And on my first reading, I actually like to go to the last paragraph. And I was wondering if there's a better way to talk about, because we're talking about the balance between conservation and development. So I actually edited the first sentence of the last paragraph to something along the lines of, while we seek to preserve and protect Madison in a way that resists significant change, some level of change over time is inevitable and growth is essential. In other words, it's not like a reasonable temptation to preserve or to conserve, really. I think we want to be a little bit more direct about that statement. And then also I'm now hyper aware of using the word character or trying not to use the word character or using it in certain ways. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Carol, what can you explain that the problem you have with the word character?
Well, the word
Yeah.
character has come to be used in a kind of zoning bias way. So we talk about protecting historic characters or the character of a town, which in a way is protecting, single family zoning that might make other options for housing less available. And I think it's been, and Aaron, please, and John, please chime in if I'm kind of mumbling through this, but I think it's been used in a way to discriminate, really.
Okay. I hadn't heard, that's why I wanted to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the legislature actually officially removed the word character, or formally removed the word character of the neighborhood from
Oh, really?
the zoning enabling statute back 2 years ago, Public Act 2129, because as the chairman said, it had been used essentially as a weapon to stop development that didn't, fit the character of the town in something of an exclusionary way. It's hard to kick that habit to use the word character. But,
well, and I think there are ways to talk about like
Mhm.
because I also serve on the Historic District Commission, we talk about the historic structures or,
Yeah.
be a little more specific about
the
what
context, the palette, the things like
Right.
that. Yeah.
Right. So break down the character into something that's really much more, tangible and not so
slightly more
subjective.
objective. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah.
I think that's well
exactly.
said.
Okay,
Thank
thank you.
So, Carol, with that change, way I'm reading that is we don't want any significant change.
Well,
Is that really what we want to say?
we're not resisting, and then I also thought, well, how should we describe significant change, or should we call it drastic change? Or, and I also don't know if we want to use the third person or the first person plural in that, or if we want to, rewrite it in a way that modifies what I've just said a bit.
Can we just take a positive approach to this? Something like we seek to foster change in something more positive. It seems like a negative way to.
Yeah, we can. And in fact, then the next sentence I was going to start with though instead of while, but maybe if we just completely rewrite that so we don't have the sort of twist.
Well, instead of like resist significant change, you could say maintain something instead, make it a little bit more positive. Just an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man, we seek to preserve and protect Madison in a way that maintains the.
Yeah.
Don't
Fundamental
use character.
character.
Don't use character.
Not the
Charm, I-
character, but the livability, the viability, something
The
like that.
vitality.
Vitality, all those alities. Yeah.
Or maybe, I don't know, maybe not protects. We said that already.
Yeah, to play
Yeah.
with this a little bit.
Yeah, that's better.
Game, guys.
Okay.
And then, so we don't have two sentences in a row that start with while. Could the
Mm.
second sentence start with though?
Oh, look at that. It can.
Yep, that's correct.
Aaron, actually, it did occur to me. Is it possible for us to do Google Documents as part of this process, or
It is, I would
John,
caution.
what do you think?
Yeah, so I would caution a little bit against it because it's sort of electronic ex parte communication.
exactly. I didn't think if it was, I didn't even know if it was allowed.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's
Typically don't.
technically possible. I think I would, yeah, recommend directing comments through staff.
And during our meetings.
Yeah, and because this is being recorded, everyone
Yeah.
sees this. Yeah,
Okay, great. And I trust you'll keep track of all the different drafts.
doing that now.
So maybe we don't have to.
So as a point to that, is it possible then to have access to the draft if you wanted to go through it and offer revisions? And how would
Yes.
you do that?
Yeah, that's what I'm asking, actually. Thanks.
So what I would
Or do you see a path to do that?
what I would ask, and we can, you know, so for instance, we can send this out after we're done with the discussion today, with this draft and through Aaron, and then would ask if, as long as people know how to track changes in a
Yep.
document, and we can do it that way
I think
and
that's-
send it back through Aaron.
Okay.
I had one nit I'd like to entertain if you didn't mind.
Yeah, go
On
ahead.
the last sentence about connectivity. Could you go to that? Yes. They are the systems, physical, virtual, and color that allow people. Somehow, as an engineer, that bothered me. I don't know why. I would have used enable.
Okay. It's a
Great.
little less, yeah, personifying a machine or a process.
Yeah.
Enable's good.
Thank
Good
you.
call.
Overall, I really like it, by the way. I don't think we said that.
I do too.
Yeah.
John, I think you did a terrific job.
Yeah.
Really.
Thank you. Yeah, some of this was easier than other parts. I would, you know, yeah, but thank you.
So, John, this is the first time I've seen it and the first time we've met, but I have a question on the resilience and sustainability section. I'm not going to wordsmith it. You're better at it than I am, that's for sure. But when I read through it, the town must consider investments in land use decisions, thinking about planning for a reimagined worst case scenario, and spend more resources in planning for recovery. This means not only decisions about where and how to build, but also decisions to escape, retreat, and recover when that is needed. So when I read that, to me, it starts to say that we need, the implication is that part of this is going to be driving decisions to make a plan B of significant size. that could house the town during the next hurricane when we lose power for a week.
Hmm.
So is that the intention? I mean, because I can read this very broadly. I get it. You know, if you live on the coast, you usually want to, here's your hurricane escape plan. Here's the sign on the side of the road. Go this way.
Yeah. Well, I think it's meant a little bit more like that. It's a little bit more like the Vermont Department of Emergency Management headquarters being built in the floodplain and getting destroyed by Hurricane Ivan. Like
Mhm.
that's a bad investment. That's a bad public investment.
Right.
And so
That's a state investment.
right, no, that's just one of my favorite
Yeah.
examples.
At the town level, what is the implication is at a town level? What is it
Yeah.
that you all were thinking? I'm just trying to catch up.
I think it's things like, in investments in roads, when you're going to, repave roads or, if you're looking at reconstructing a road has frequent inundation, you probably need to ask the question, are we, spending a lot of money in elevating this, or should we be considering other mitigations and passively like de-emphasizing the importance of that road if it as a town way, not necessarily abandoning people who are on that road, but sort of de-emphasizing certain investments that are likely to be that you're just pouring good money after bad for
Yeah, I'm with you on
climatological reasons.
Okay.
My
And
interpretation.
don't build a new school in the floodway or something like that.
I think
It's
maybe it
about
will become,
To me, it's about planning, taking into account sea level rise.
yeah, and the fact that we have Route 1 as one of our main arteries, which could be underwater. But I think also, Bob, to go back to your question about it, it will become more clear as we develop these themes and get down to some of the
Okay.
specifics more. But those are really good points.
Okay. No, I'm fine with it. I don't disagree with the language. I was trying to understand the extent of it. I mean, if this were in place now, one could argue that we should not have sold Liberty School. That would have been Plan B, put people there. So I'm trying to take the next step of the,
Right.
how broadly it could be interpreted. Okay, no, I'm fine with it. Just curious.
Great.
So
Any
what we'll do is, and I don't want to cut the discussion short on that.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
But so what we'll do when we're done discussing this section, again, not cutting it short, is we'll send around this revised version, allow people to sit with it and do some markup. And we can look to, maybe sort of finalize the draft at the next session.
Yeah, John, my one complaint is that for me today, I did a training thing which it was listed as 4 to 5. It really lasted 4 until almost 6.
Yeah.
And I had other commitments in the afternoon, so
Yeah.
I didn't have an opportunity to look at anything.
Uh,
It would have been more
yeah.
constructive. So
It would have, yeah, no, I apologize for getting this to
that is a
you
day in advance at least.
late in the game. Yeah.
That's
It's one of
all.
those things that ideally I would have these things to you a couple of weeks ahead, but then they don't think gives me a couple of weeks to work on them.
It's probably Aaron's fault, I
Yeah.
assume. It's
Thanks. Appreciate it.
That's right. Aaron, I gave this to you 3.5 weeks ago.
yeah, Aaron, come on. Can you come on? Okay, sorry.
You know
Um,
me.
No, that's absolutely on me. And we'll try to speed up our deliveries a little bit. But if there's, and again, recognizing that we don't want to necessarily have you read and edit this on the fly. Why don't we distribute that? And I will turn it over to Steve to talk a little bit about some of the introduction stuff that he put together.
Great.
So I'm going to share my screen. I have an updated version of the document that was sent out earlier today, and I apologize as well for the late notice on those items. I've cleaned up a couple consistencies. I've reformatted a couple things, but largely this is the same document you all received. But basically what I'm going to go over is the introduction and the demographics section of the plan. And really the introduction section that I've put together is mainly oriented to take a reader, somebody who's taking a look at this plan, and have them understand what the intent of this plan is, why we're doing this, and what the statutory framework is that mandates us to do it, but also enables us to do it. So to start off with, we've outlined in the first section here, what is a plan of conservation and development? Well, it's an advisory document that provides the blueprint for what we're going to do as a town in the future. We've made clear that it's not a mandate. We're not telling specific departments or specific personnel what exactly they have to do, but we're saying when you're going through your daily responsibilities, when you're going through your commission actions, these are things that are going to guide you in making your decisions for the town. This is how the town's going to invest money. And it's going to cover these specific areas: economic development, natural resource protection, transportation, infrastructure, housing development, sustainability, et cetera. And we've covered those things more specifically in the themes that we've developed for this specific plan. But in general, we've broken our main themes down into these separate categories, which include goals, which are our overarching visions or ideas that we want to incorporate into specific objectives and actions. And those goals are going to span across implementers. They're going to be spread across different themes in our plan. And then there's policies. Policies we can think of as the guiding rails that we're going to be operating on, and in between when we try to make decisions and when we coordinate our comprehensive planning efforts. And then there's implementation strategies. And that's how we get from plan to action. Who's going to be doing what? How should they be doing it? And when should they be doing it? What's the timeline? Is this a more urgent item, or is this something that we can get to when we get to, or when we obtain the necessary funding? Is there any questions about this section or any suggestions?
No, it's good.
Okay.
That's good.
Number 2 is, what's the statutory basis for our plan of conservation and development? And that's the Connecticut General Statutes, which mandates that towns have to prepare and amend these plans on a 10-year basis. It requires that we review it, we make revisions as needed at least every 10 years. In the plan, we have these items that we're required to consider: the need for housing, health, recreation, social services, utilities, safety, transportation, communications, affordable housing, on and on. And that's the reason that we are putting together this plan. Do I need to go into any more detail about that? Is there any suggestions? Okay. So the other thing that we need to consider when we're making this plan is compliance with the state's plan of conservation and development. The state has their own plan of conservation and development that they adopt every 5 years. And interestingly enough, the state adopted the 2018 to 2023 plan of conservation and development in May of 2022.
The crazy part of that is that it's almost exactly identical to the 2013 to 2018
It is like a
plan.
copy and paste.
So long.
I'd be happy to tell you, but it's a really stupid story.
So the main way that state plan is broken down, and what we need to consider when we're adopting our plan is compliance with the state's 6 growth management principles. And those are to redevelop or revitalize regional centers in areas with existing or currently planned infrastructure, expanding housing opportunities and choices to accommodate different needs, concentrating development around transportation nodes and along major transportation corridors to support viability of transportation options, conserve and restore the natural environment, cultural and historic resources, and traditional rural lands, protect and ensure the integrity of environmental assets critical to public health and safety, and promote integrated planning across all levels of government to address issues on statewide, regional, and local basis. Of course, we want to do these things. And I hope we will do them.
Steve, I have a question
Yep.
It's Carol. Do we need to insert anything about the regional plan of conservation and development?
I think it would be worthwhile. We could.
Because you'll actually notice that some of the phrases I got are from there that I drafted early on.
No, oh, sorry. Yeah, I think it's not statutorily required, but it's a good idea and
At least
they-
to reference it, yeah, at
Oh,
least to
absolutely.
summarize it. But whereas the state plan of conservation, we do have to follow and make sure that we can check all the boxes, is that right? I mean, we don't have to follow it, but we need to be sure that we've included everything that they require.
And we don't want to go against the principles that are set forth in that plan. You know, if the state's telling you to, maybe you need to build more housing options or consider the diversity of housing, if we come out and say, well, we don't want to build anything, then maybe that's not a good idea.
Steve, at the end, is it a good idea then to map these 6 against the final POCD that we come up with?
I think definitely gonna want to look back at these items when we're done. And maybe we could include a section that says, you know, we think we've done these 6 things for these reasons.
Yeah, okay.
And in different sections, even say this addresses number
They're saying
3.
Expand housing opportunities can reference sections 3, 5, and 12 in the POCD. Done. Just
I
make
see,
it a little ironclad.
Yeah.
If I just thinking, knowing that now, then we can build a POCD with that concept in mind.
Okay, excellent. So the next section is history of the plan of conservation and development. It basically outlines when the town last adopted their last 2 plans of conservation and development and what kind of planning exercises they've done in the meantime. I've also included the main themes and their corresponding objectives from the prior plan so that we have those things as a benchmark and somebody who's reading this can say, yes, this is what we considered. Maybe this is how it's been evolved since. I didn't put all the details in there, but these are, you know, in similar fashion, this is how it was broken down in the past. So then we have, I'm sorry.
Sorry, it's me again. Do we want to go through, because we did sort of evaluate the previous goals and how, whether or not they were met. Do we want to say anything about that, or should we just put it out there and then move on?
I did say in the closing sentence here
Oh,
that
good.
the 2023 plan of conservation developments intended to take the pulse of Madison's progress on the prior plan's objectives. So I would
Okay.
hope that later in this plan we can take a look at what the outstanding items are, and I think there's an Excel spreadsheet on the website that has
Yes,
some of
there
those
is.
items with the progress, and we can look through that and say these are ones that we still want to prioritize, and these are ones that maybe we need to, you know, move on from.
Okay, great.
Okay. Anything else on that section? Okay, so the next section here is our demographics and population profile. And as part of this plan, we were able to use the 2020 census data, which was recently published. And as of the 2020 census, Madison had 17,691 residents, which is pretty close to what they had for the last 2 censuses. And basically what I outlined here in this first paragraph is kind of consistent with like a summary of the development of Madison's population. Like most Connecticut suburbs, they experienced a significant boom following World War II and following the development of the interstate highway system. From 1950 to 1970, the population tripled from around 3,000 to 10,000 residents, and then subsequently grew between 1970 and 2000 to 18,000 residents, and has kind of hovered around that level since. I outlined some of the items that have resulted in the Madison's development into the way it is today, which include its central location along the shoreline, its high quality of life, and some of the town's amenities that draw people here. And below, I've summarized some of the population numbers from the 10-year census intervals going back to 1850. This is, and then taken some information from the CT Data Collaborative, which has the population projection for the next 30 years as well. So that's highlighted in green. It's intended to, or it's anticipated that it will decrease slightly, but we're not radically changing. John, did you have a question?
Yes, Steve. So how do we count people who may not live here full time? Is that, do we take that into? I mean, I didn't see anything in the document about summer residents or part-time residents, or do we take that into account at all in any of these numbers?
No.
Okay, these are just full-time Madison residents.
That would depend on the protocols for the census and when and how they calculate those numbers.
Okay. Is that something we should know?
I think it would be worth noting that there is fluctuations within the population seasonally, and that kind of our population numbers are highly dependent on seasons, and that so is the economy and those other things.
My understanding is that the census measure is who's living here on April 1st.
You said April 1st?
Yeah, so it doesn't count summer residents, seasonal people.
By the way, your graph at the top is a typo.
Could you point it out for me?
Right there.
Population.
Oh, yeah. I saw that and tried to correct it, but I couldn't click on it.
Now you did.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Do we have the data for seasonal residents anywhere else besides if the 2020 census didn't get it?
I'm not aware of a seasonal resident statistic, but we can definitely look into it.
It would be, I think it would be worth adding.
Thought we had some data. I don't know if it was through assessor or
Did the affordable housing
real
study?
estate numbers or something.
No, we didn't. I don't think we talked about that because I mean, if it's seasonal, it's by definition really not sort of a permanent residence for someone in terms of affordability.
Right.
I mean, and seasonal varies in definition, whether they're actual seasonal cottages or if someone is living in a year-round residence seasonally. So we distinguish a little differently.
Do we have data for rental units?
Yeah, I think we do.
Yeah.
Not in the decennial census, but we would have that in the American Community Survey.
Yeah.
Which is that 5-year, sort of sliding window of data. But we could, yeah, Steve, you want to make note of that? We can certainly put rental units. And there might have been a stat of that in the affordable housing plan.
I think there might have been two.
Something like that.
And what about the Hammonasset people, camping and kind of booming in that population in the summer? Is that something would that impact any of our decisions on anything?
It would certainly impact how you think about what kind of economic decisions you want to make for the town. I think in this section, we're mainly trying to capture this for like a future projections type of scenario, or are there massive changes going on type of investigation, where you'd want to know maybe where the town needs to spend more money, what services we need to allocate things to, who's going to want what services. I think if the state had a plan to expand Hammonasset, we might want to know about it. Or if there's, decreasing, maybe if there was decreasing like residency at the campsites over like a 10-year period or something. I don't know if we could get that data.
Yeah, I mean, we get annual information in collaborating with Deep as far as expected visitors and things like that, and impacts on police or, you know, emergency personnel or traffic related.
Aaron, I wonder with these population estimates, if the pandemic has been factored in, that may well increase the numbers if these transitions were made prior to the pandemic.
We did talk about that during our affordable housing
Yeah.
process, and I think we don't necessarily have that data, although I know we included language that we didn't anticipate that it was a significant change. We've had some increase in population, and even younger, you know, the under 19, because we've had to adjust even in the planning for our new elementary school. The numbers, the projected numbers have increased slightly over the last couple of years. I don't know how significant that really is. I think probably as we move along here with Steve, you're going to talk about which populations are growing, right? So maybe that's a better spot to put it in. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think relative, the consensus generally was, you know, relative to the pandemic related in-migration, out-migration, is that, you know, there might have been a little bit of a bump in migration, but it didn't seem to represent some sort of paradigm shift in all of a sudden we're an entirely different sort of destination. But yeah, I'll shut up. Go ahead, Steve.
Any other notes? I've got a couple here about seasonal populations, calculation of the census numbers, rental units from the American Community Survey, and Hammonasset campground residents.
Well, Steve, I think it's on your next page, but regarding the breakdown of the demographics, that could be a little more clear, right? Because you're showing that the proportion of younger people is going to grow, but the overall population is trending lower. So it's a little bit unclear how many younger people will be living in town in the next few years. Do you know what I mean?
Like make another histogram type chart like this with, you know, these anticipated numbers.
Exactly. So you show the percentage of the population, but the population overall is changing. So it's just a little bit unclear. How many residents under 19 should we expect if those trends prove to be accurate?
Could be the same number.
I like that. I like that.
That's good idea. I also actually, Aaron, going back to the affordable housing study, I found that it did switch back and forth between percentages and numbers, and I was sort of trying to make it all apples and apples and oranges, if that makes sense. So maybe we could also be sure that we can capture the data the same way. Steve, I mean, it's fine to have different kinds of charts and graphs and histograms, but so long as we can compare it, as you said, John, in a way that makes sense.
Would it make it clearer if, say, in addition to this, say this line graph here that's showing, if you had a table next to it which outlines those numbers?
Yeah, I think so.
Definitely, yes.
So I'll try to show, you know, the same information in multiple ways in a way that's, you know, cohesive but not overwhelming.
Exactly. I mean, what you're trying to show and express, right, is that the population is both going to get older and younger. And so it'd be interesting to see what the projection is in 10 years for the over 65 portion of total and the under 19 total.
Yeah, I think we do actually have, we actually could put those in the data projections. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's, I mean, we have from the Connecticut State Data Center, and the Connecticut Data Collaborative, we do have the projections through to 2050, and there is a age cohort breakdown in there. It downloading it gets a little complicated, but we can certainly include that.
You've got all the data you need right here. You got the percentages and you've got the 2020 and 2040 projected population. You just need to apply them and put them in that chart. The blue
But
chart.
in terms of like the 5-year age breakdowns, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll take this chart here. Sorry, things got jumbled since I added text in, but I will make it so we can compare this one with the 2020 and we can see the changes in the histogram.
In the projections that generated these charts, do they talk about the assumptions driving the increase or the stabilization of the population drop off after 2030, or is it just a large model?
John, do you know the answer to that? I gleaned it from the model that they generated.
The State Data Center.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have an inside knowledge of the methodologies.
I can look into that and include it in the projection section.
Interesting data.
Does it make sense to include links to sites where you're getting the data or referencing the sources?
Well, we can reference the source a little bit more completely. I don't like using links because links get broken super fast. But yeah, we can annotate that a little bit more fully.
You've got a few academics on the commission.
I asked Aaron to keep you guys off, but
we've kind of jumped around a bit here. Would you like me to go into more detail in any particular section, or do you want me to just keep going through the way I was?
I think you're fine the way you were.
Okay.
The only thing that I was curious about was the chart. Just scroll up a little bit further. I was just wondering if that drop off from 2019 to 20 has any correlation with COVID deaths.
It's prior to the pandemic. I was wondering that too. I looked up when we started going through pandemic and it was 2020, I believe.
Yeah, I think it was March 2020.
March 2020, I know that, yeah.
Sort of official, yeah.
There's a 10% drop.
I mean, it's, the state economy is maybe bigger factor.
Could well be.
Okay, so I'm just going to keep pushing through here then. This paragraph here summarizes that we've been on a slight decline for the past 9 years since 2013. We obviously just talked about that larger drop that happened in 2019, where there's a reduction of about 300 residents there. And that dropped, well, not necessarily a correlation, but the average household size in town has been decreasing, dropping from 2.72 in 2000 to 2.61 in 2020. So we're seeing both a drop in household size and in total population at the same time. This got a little bit jumbled up since I've been adding some text in here, but these were our population projections in 5-year intervals going through 2040. We're seeing projected decline up until, it looks like this is even up until 2035, with stable numbers between 2035 and then a slight uptick again in 2040. Obviously very speculative in that kind of window. And I will provide you some information as to what the methodology is from the state's data center to include in the next draft. So the biggest two age groups are, as we discussed as part of the affordable housing plan, are the young and the old. And I've just included some language here about, why we'd want to consider what age groups are changing, and how this document will help make decisions about those changes. If you have a lot of seniors, you're going to want to invest in your senior facilities and services, and maybe cater housing development to fit those needs. But whatever those preferences may be, it's going to help us make those decisions by understanding and dissecting this information. So approximately 1/4 of the population is 19 years or younger. As we talked about in the affordable housing plans, the public schools have recently seen some change, and we're anticipating a slight uptick in the school age population. But the largest cohort of the population is those people who are 45 years or older, with about 1/4 of Madison's residents being 65 and up. And I've included the demographics for the baby boomer generation, which is a large portion of that 45 and up population, which is those people being born between 1945 and 1965. They're about 30% of that 57% who's, I'm sorry, they're 30% of the overall, which in total comprise 47% of Madison's total population.
That's higher than the US on average, isn't it? Do you know? I think it is.
What was the stat, Steve? The
The percentage of baby boomers as a percentage of Madison's total population.
I think it is. I think the particularly the Connecticut midshore line and sort of
Yeah, we're
Middlesex County
skewed.
is really notoriously older.
You can say old, it's okay.
Notoriously?
Okay.
Notorious. Like Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Don't be dissing her.
Okay.
I say that notorious is sort of a flashback to a lot of conversations I had in Old Saybrook, where their young population is just dropping off a cliff, and they, from a marketing standpoint, they've decided to sort of embrace it, and to pitch Old Saybrook as a place to retire, essentially. Anyway, carry on.
Okay, so the bottom paragraph here in the bottom chart goes through what some of the projected changes are in those specific age groups. And the big two to focus on are the 5 to 19 population and the 40 to 64. Most significant is the 40 to 64, which is projected to have about a 6% decrease in total population, and as a percentage of the total population. And the 5 to 19 age group is expected to increase from 18 to 22% of the total population. Those are our big two changes. Everything else is relatively stable. The next closest would be the uptick in the 0 to 4 age range, which is 3 to 6%.
So according to the US government, baby boomers are 21.16% of the total population, and you millennials are at 21.75.
We're getting beat.
And that's what we have for the demographics in town. I have some good notes. I've added them in here. Is there any other notes or information that you'd like to see in this section?
Steve,
I'm
you
sorry, go ahead.
Steve, you said you were going to add some detail around what the projections are driven by here in this, especially around this last chart here with the the 5-year, whatever we got here, the age breakouts. What's driving the 20 to 2040 estimates?
Yes.
You put that note up higher, I think, in our.
Yes.
Yeah,
I
to
have
look
it
at
here.
the methodology of the breakdown. Yeah.
Methodology.
Yeah, okay, yeah, okay, thank you.
I wonder if somewhere, do we have data or are we going to look at data for where the Madison workforce works?
Ah,
And some kind of profile of the workforce, people employed who live here.
There's a couple of other, I think workforce would be really good. And there's some decent charts about sort of commute, in and out of town. We had talked about a little bit about, do we want to put in housing stuff here, housing, break down some of the stuff that we had put into the housing plan, or should we save that for when we have a discussion about housing a little bit later in the there's sort of different, or we could talk about some of the economic stuff, but that might be more appropriate in a later chapter. But yeah, workforce, I think workforce, some stuff would be useful here.
It would be really interesting. Yeah. We'll
Is
just
there-
quickly comparing this to what was in the 2013 Plan of Conservation and Development. This is great. It's much more information, I think, and I think it's going to be presented really clearly.
Thank you. I thought, Steve did a nice
Thank you.
compilation here.
Good job, Steve.
So I think, Madam Chairman, at this point, and what we can do is we'll add Steve's annotation. We can circulate this as the working draft again if people want to add questions or markups. And we'll circulate this in advance of next time. And then it's really sort of a question of where you want to go from there. We may start to get into some of the more substantive stuff. Some of the issues of the built environment and the natural environment. And at that point, before we do any significant writing, we may want to, sort of invite some of the stakeholders to kind of speak, sort of an open-ended discussion about hopes and dreams.
That sounds great for different sections.
Mhm.
Is it too early to start combining these documents?
Oh, no, of course not.
I think
yeah.
that'd be great.
Is there a plan for additional data besides the age demographics?
I think we'd love to include housing data. I think we'd like to include the workforce data. I think we'd like to include some data about transportation or where people are commuting.
Okay. What about like population density throughout Madison? Or and I'm thinking of population, but I'm assuming we'll also get into current distribution of different types of properties, things like that. I'm not sure what.
Yeah,
data
and I
we
mean,
can grab.
a lot of that is, we can do that through, I think maps are probably the best way to relay some of that. The way there's sort of like a zoning layer, which obviously gives you like the theoretical allowable density, but then there's
Yeah.
also some data we could probably get from the assessor, where even if something is in a single family zone, if it's a multifamily, it can be reflected somewhat differently. Zoning versus land use, truly.
Yeah,
But
I mean, we have existing land use maps and density maps.
Yeah.
Erin, is there any way, we've talked a little bit about non-conforming lots. Is there any way to quantify that, or is that just out of reach?
Do you mean lots themselves that don't meet the minimum zoning standards, or are you referring to uses?
Uses, I was thinking more.
That could be a little bit of a loaded question.
I know, sorry.
Um,
I mean, I'm looking at the existing land use map from 2013, but
Yeah, we could get it. I mean, we don't have a generally speaking, a list of non-conforming uses.
use, yeah.
And that's general. There's, if something is non-conforming yet not legal versus
Right.
a non-conforming use. I mean, we have, one of our challenges is that we have this section 4 of our zoning regulations that has quite a bit of uses that have been permitted as text amendments
Exceptional.
by
Yeah.
special exceptions.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we can look at that, but I'm not sure in what context where we want to put that in the
Okay.
plan and what it would relate to.
Yeah, I mean, we have mixed use
far
as
I-
Yeah.
I guess perhaps if you have an area that has uses that are not consistent with the underlying uses in the zone as far as future considerations for rezoning or overlay, something something of that nature.
Yeah.
That's where I think it would be relevant.
Okay, thanks.
So, sorry for asking the questions again. So either John or Steve or whoever might know this. I'm looking at, I mean, the data we have is great, but I'm looking at the three paired themes. And when I look at like vitality and connectivity, that to me implies that we need to know the socioeconomic layout of the town and where people live. If you're going to drive connectivity, we need to know where they are so you can connect them. The vitality part to me says we have downtown Madison, but that's not where everyone is. So are there other locations within Madison that can be steered towards being a more vital second downtown? I mean, Madison always seems to end up, it's on Route 1 and that's it. But there's a lot of people that don't live there. So is there some other way we can consider doing that? Then the resiliency and sustainability gets to that idea too of knowing where people are. And opportunity and growth is the socioeconomic part. Just seems like we should really, it's on us to really understand what we look like and how we look compared to others, and see if there's an opportunity that we need to shift or not shift, but at least go in.
Sure. So I would add.
The more we know, the better. Then the argument's unassailable.
What I would take away immediately from what you're saying is Steve, a recommendation that we should actually put, when you say economic information, we should probably put in some socioeconomic stuff.
Yeah,
like
that's what I'm
incomes.
If that's allowable. It's like I'm asking for things I don't know. But.
Yeah. But I like the way you're thinking, Robert. But you're way ahead of us.
Yeah, you are way ahead of us.
That's because I just started. I have no idea what y'all have been through trying to get here.
So. What we're doing here in this big intersection is sort of who we are, and then
okay.
You've jumped ahead as to how do we get to where we want to go.
Okay.
Which is awesome, but
I can
take
wait.
a breath. We'll get there.
All right.
Be careful, or you may have to write that section.
Well, writing where we want to be is easy. It's the part to getting there that's hard.
Getting there. Well, this is great, John and Steve. Thank you so much.
Sure. And thank you for the input. What we'll do is we'll compile this into a single document with the outline for sharing. And I guess, Aaron, it's really sort of, we want to talk about sort of I think it's maybe time to start talking to people and start inviting people in conversation. And so I think it would sort of be, how do you want to approach that?
Right. And are we moving forward to our item 3 and working into our natural environment at this point?
No, I mean, we don't have to do this 1, 2, 3, but 3 is next.
And we do have a group, we have a list of all the stakeholders that and the organizations, and Carol and I had talked about this as creating these columns and making sure that the appropriate parties are under these, and many of them will cross into both the natural and built environment. But yes, I think it would be appropriate at this point to start reaching out. I know, and I shouldn't say to start, we have reached out and I see members of commissions joining us at our meetings, which is great to see. But we need to go beyond commissions as well and get the public involved as well. So I'm happy to spearhead that, and since we have the list, and reach out to everybody and invite them. I just, do you want to focus on a particular subject at our next meeting to, I guess, to be able to be a little more specific in my invitation?
I think that's a question for the chairman and the commission, which way you,
Yeah.
where you'd like to
And-
start.
John, do you have you done a sort of calendar timeline of how you hope that coming months will unfold? But we need to have this done by November, is that right?
I think probably technically, I wouldn't worry overly if things get a little bit attenuated, but yeah, I haven't, I think we've sort of compressed and expanded, so I can do a revised outline or timeline from where we are.
I think that'd be great. And then we can sort of start scheduling stakeholders and other meetings with appropriate groups. That would be great.
John, is there a benefit to having more of a general forum where you're just inviting an open conversation rather than trying to reach out specifically to stakeholders? Do we want to make this a little?
I think, I mean, I think the answer could certainly be both. I don't think you want an open forum in one of these meetings, in one of your monthly planning meetings, because it's a little bit too uncontrolled and a little bit too much of a free for all. I think, but we want to make sure that we have opportunities for the public at large to sort of just speak. And we may want to schedule that sooner than later, maybe something in the early spring. But I think for some of these, some of these built environment, natural environment conversations, I think you want to invite some of the targeted stakeholders to really talk about some of their goals and their concerns, as sort of, again, not to downplay the importance of the public writ large, but some of the key stakeholders, the folks who have really focused on these issues, to give you that sort of input at this level.
So you could draft something. So we could create something where we're getting more feedback
Input.
rather than a blank
Yeah.
slate receiving information. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So
So if you like, I mean,
outreach to stakeholders.
yeah, I guess, do you want, I mean, just to initially, do you want to invite somebody to, I guess we're February, to the March meeting? And we can, there'll be some things to look at already. We're gonna, like have another look at the vision stuff and the demographics. But, to start to get into that initial conversations, you want to have someone there.
I think it would be great.
Okay.
Especially if it's natural environment. I don't know how
Is that what we're
comfortable
starting
any
with?
of
Yeah.
us are.
So
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
sorry.
I mean, it's broad. I mean, if we get into natural resources as well as recreation, management, protection, and climate, I mean, that's a lot for one meeting.
So what we can do, and this is something that I've done in a couple of towns, is along with the sort of invitation, Aaron, that you forward to these groups to say, okay, would you come to our meeting on March, whatever it is, it's probably March 2nd also.
Second.
Yes.
To give them a little prompt, sort of what are your concerns, what are your goals for the next 10 years, what are some investments the town should be making, so that they can kind of structure their input, and we can have that as part of their a little questionnaire for them to fill out.
Okay.
And Aaron, I can get that to you.
Yeah, I like that.
You mentioned the word questionnaire. Would we at some
I didn't mean to
point
say that.
want to do some kind of a scientific survey of our residents to get some sort of systematic population data?
Yeah, I hesitate a little bit at the word scientific, because that maybe costs a little bit more sort of effort and money than maybe strictly necessary on something like this. But to do a, you know, to do a community survey is certainly something that is worthwhile.
Is there any way if we do that to actually get people to respond? The times I've done it, you end up with so few people that it's of no real value, just noise.
Yeah.
It's
You're
great
right.
if you get it.
Yeah, about
yeah,
1,000.
That's why I use the word scientific.
yeah,
Yeah.
that gets
If you're
impossible.
just having a call-in thing, you're
Yeah.
gonna get.
Yeah.
No, I mean, this is,
frankly,
I mean,
not reliable.
we put the community, the affordable housing survey out via SurveyMonkey. So it wasn't like a phone poll. No. And Aaron, we got a bunch. Madison did extraordinarily well in
I
We did
their,
about 1,000. I thought we had.
which is quite good for a community of.
I know, but
Madison size.
that's 7% of the
Mhm.
population.
Yeah, it's not,
So
it's not a
it's
huge
of
amount.
no,
Well,
yeah, I know,
household,
it's good. It's a good response. It's better than what you would expect, but it's still not. You get strong opinions, but you don't get the general. I don't know how
It's
to
a
fix it.
tricky thing, you know, to do
Yeah,
it,
it
to
is.
do a true scientific poll is going to be an investment.
Yeah, it's hard.
And again, the thing that, I mean, what's important to remember is that, you know, you are charged as the leaders, you know, in planning and zoning, to draft this document. And, you know, it's up to you to solicit the sort of input you feel is appropriate and to give those bits of input appropriate weight, you know. So just like the demographics, you know, that Steve went through, you know, show population increase or decline that's projected, you know, that's not fate, and you don't have to, you know, make all of your decisions based on that. You give it appropriate weight. Similarly, you put an opinion poll out there, you know, and if 1,000 people respond, you don't have to consider that a binding referendum. You give it
Mhm.
the weight that you feel is appropriate. It's up to you as leaders to filter all of those things and come out of it with some sort of direction. So, you know, a scientific survey would be awesome, but it's not critical to your mission.
It's something we should think about, in my view, and think about it. I mean, that's what I've done for a living, so.
All right. Well, care to offer some pro bono services?
Yeah, but again, I think the point is well taken. And it's after we've come along and said, look, there are some areas where we could really use input because we don't know some critical bits of information about people's preferences. And with appropriate, you know, doing as a mail survey with a follow-up and so, you could get a decent response rate. But again, it's not something that this is not a plebiscite at the end. That would be that's not our mandate. And that would be, I think, profoundly unfortunate. That this is not meant to be a political document to be able to, quote, sell something. And the framing is extremely important, and we may not want to do it. But there may, when we're into this later, say, look, there's 3 or 4 bits of information we would really want to know about either what people plan to do 10 years from now, thinking in 5 years, is it likely that you will do so-and-so? And are you certain of that or not certain? Where we would get information that we would think would be useful. So it's just something to think about, but a bad slapdash, order effects ignored and all of that. If we're doing that, I would oppose doing it because we're not going to get useful information. But if it's going to help us come up with something that's going to complete the goals of where we're heading, then it's worth doing. Anyway, that's my 2 cents. And I'd be willing to work with people on it, but I'm suggesting strongly that we think about it, not that we necessarily do it. I think we'll know in a few months whether we think it's worthwhile to get some more data about where it may not be asking them their preferences on anything of what they want, but what are they planning on doing? You know, so we can say, well, look, we have these data. It would help to interpret the trends data beyond what we have. I don't know enough now to say if I think that would be useful, but I hope in a few months we'd have some kind of a consensus saying, nah, it's not worth our time, it's not worth any money, we don't need it, let's go ahead. Or there are some things that would be really good to know about where people think they're going to be 5 years from now, and maybe some other sorts of questions. I don't know, but I'm just going with that.
Keep thinking.
I could see that, a very specifically focused question,
Mhm.
steer, as opposed to an open-ended, what do you think kind of thing. Those never,
A combination of close-ended as well as open-ended. Hey, give us what you think are the 2 or 3 most important. Anyway, think about it.
Thanks.
Okay.
Elliot or Janet, any other thoughts or comments?
Well, sorry.
Yeah, we hear you. Oh, you just muted yourself, Janet.
Muted.
Now you're unmuted.
Okay, sorry. Just to what you said, I mean, I've been in a town where we tried to do something like that and it was just useless because of the response, but I mean, it is your business. I'm just saying, sometimes it's a great idea and then it just never, it doesn't generate what we hope to get, and so therefore it's not necessarily helpful. But
So if you're not doing it right, it's positively harmful.
Mhm.
I work for the National Science Foundation funding social science research, a good deal of which is survey research. And if you don't do it right, it's just dumb. But there are whole professional associations that have boring panels on whether 5 or 7 item questions are better under what circumstances, and how to deal with response rates, and anyway, there's a science to this, and maybe we don't want to do it at all, but we got to be careful. We shouldn't just throw something out there. It's only going to be when, gee, it would really help if we knew what percentage of people think in 5 years they're going to be in Canada or whatever.
John's going.
I'm out.
Not this year. Elliot, any other thoughts or questions or anything?
Not anything in particular. I mean, I've soaking in all this information right now because I unfortunately did not have an opportunity to read through all this in advance of tonight's meeting. I didn't get home from work until almost 6 o'clock, so definitely informative, and like the direction that everything is moving in so far.
Great. And we're still in early stages, so we
Oh, yeah.
can change course as we need to. Well,
I
thank you.
echo that. I
everyone.
think John and Steve did a great job.
Yeah, I do too.
Thank you. So what we'll do is, Aaron, we'll work with you. We'll circulate a compiled working document. I'll work with you on sort of a preliminary questionnaire invitation, and we can sort of begin conversations with some of the stakeholders next time.
I think that sounds great.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Cool.
Thanks for your time, everybody. We'll see you
Thank you
soon.
both.
Thank you.
Hey,
You and
Right,
Mark.
bye. Thank you.
Great. Well, I gotta say, I think we have a good team. I really like the way everyone's speaking up and participating. And Bob Reinhardt, don't apologize for your questions, please. Just
Great.
keep them coming.
It's new guy syndrome.
Yeah. Well, I don't want it to wear off.
We're all new, pretty much all new guy syndrome. So
Yeah, we're all kind of in the honeymoon phase here. At any rate, on our agenda, next up, we have pending items. Aaron, did you want to talk about these different applications?
Not really. Most of them are just placeholders, so you know what's
Placeholders.
coming. And I think one of the, I guess we could call it a downside from designating our first meeting of the month to this planning initiative is that all your regulatory actions and this are stacked at your next meeting. So
stacked a little bit, but it gives us some time in between even to look at all the documents that are already posted. So that's good.
Right. So we're expecting 2 hearings at the next meeting, continuation from the text amendment that we had last month. We're also expecting a hearing for the zone boundary change for the proposed plan development district at 155 New Road for the residential portion. For those of you who were not here, there was a commercial medical office plan development master plan proposal a couple of months ago for that south side property. And if you recall from our last meeting, those are the 2 opportunity areas that are currently designated and the only 2 properties that are permitted to apply for a plan development district. So we'll get to walk through that master plan process again at our next meeting. Next on is 9 Neck Road. It's an application for a 3-lot subdivision, which includes a coastal site plan application. That's the former Watrous nursing home that they're proposing 3 residential lots. We have 2 new receipts that have come in since the last meeting. They're officially received this evening. One is for 885 Boston Post Road. That's the former Elizabeth's Restaurant, Elizabeth's Cafe downtown for redevelopment project there, mixed use development. And the next is 14 New Road, which is Precision X-ray, right next door to Welding Works
Madison.
that you saw at
The
your
ra-
last meeting.
The racket club is near there too, right?
What's that?
Across the street, I think.
Isn't that the ones across the street from the Madison Racket Club?
I think so.
On the other side of the railroad tracks.
Yeah,
yes.
right.
Yep, you can see it from the Racket Club. So that's an addition and renovation project that they're proposing there as well. And that one is going to be tabled to the March hearing. There are inland wetlands on the property. And the commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission, cannot take action until after the Inland Wetlands Agency acts. So just timing wise, that's pushed out another month. Other than that, I think we're on to minutes, I believe.
Matt, before we continue, Madam Chair, if I could just, I'm going to have to recuse myself the next meeting because of 9 Neck Road. And I'm the listing agent on that property at Watrous Nursing Home. So I don't know if I have to do that formally that night or
Yes.
how that's done. Okay.
So
And
it
then
would
the,
only be for that actual application that you would have
Yes.
to recuse yourself. You'd be able to
Exactly.
participate in the rest of the hearing.
right, exactly.
The rest
But
of the meeting.
I do have another potential thing that I might have to recuse myself for. I'm a neighbor of, is it 885, the new proposed restaurant
Yes.
on Boston Post Road?
Yes, so if you're within the distance where you're going to receive notice.
I
and-
am, because I saw we were listed. I didn't realize that until I read that.
Yes, so that's another one. Yes, that is
will have to-
recommended if you are within distance to be considered an aggrieved party. I agree, that would be.
What if I'm not aggrieved? It doesn't matter, just should recuse myself.
Just
Right.
the appearance of aggrievement.
Gotcha.
And yeah, be sure to just make those same comments at the meeting.
Okay.
At the next meeting.
Aaron, one question on the recusal. I know in the past, when we've been in live meetings, the person had to actually leave the room. So is that going to be the situation here in the Zoom platform where Janet will have to be taken down from the
Right, so
participate?
she could turn her video off and mute, and then we can invite her back after.
Okay.
I think that would be appropriate. I don't know that we need to demote her to, and not demote, but switch her over to an attendee verse. I think in the past, when we've had recusals, they've just turned their screen off and muted.
Okay.
and came
Yeah, I
back.
don't remember doing any during the Zoom process over the last couple of years where anybody had to recuse himself.
Yeah. And when we abstain,
I
it's just.
can't think of one either, Elliot. That's a good question.
Yeah.
It is a good question.
Well,
So
we're
we'll-
not hybrid
think-
still, right? We won't be hybrid.
No, we're staying with
No,
Zoom.
so that's another, and I'm happy to kind of talk
Yeah.
about that under remarks.
Can I talk
yeah.
about the recusal thing a little bit? Believe it or not, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do the March training that Saturday with you guys because I have a commitment. And so I've signed up for these short sessions through the Land Use Institute at Connecticut.
Yukon
It's the
Clear,
same thing.
yeah.
It was listed as an hour. It ended up being an hour and 45 minutes. But today's topic was bias and recusals, and when you recuse. So what they basically said, you don't need to leave the room. But to do that, you can do it, but it's not necessary. This is just for your information. This was their teaching on the topic. They taught more than on the topic, but anyway, for your information.
I was there
those are
too. Bob.
great,
I saw your name.
Yeah, those are great training sessions, and I actually am gonna, if we want to go through the minutes first, and Carol, you can do your comments. I'll give a
Sure.
little more information on the continuing education requirements for you and how we should look to handle that over the next year in reporting.
Okay, so can we move on to approval of minutes? Elliot? Oh, sorry, it's John Duza.
I'm here. Sure.
You're
So
off the
the,
hook, Elliot.
Old habits.
January
Sorry.
19th, 2023 meeting. Members present were Snow, Hitchcock, Duza, O'Connor, Reinhardt, Morgan, and Peckinpah. Could I please have a motion for approval
I'll make a motion to approve.
and a second?
I
Second.
second.
So it's a long meeting. There's 10 pages. Any comments or discussion or corrections? Okay, there's two minor typos. One on page 2, the word has should be have. The second on page 7, wishes should be wish. Vote to approve.
Approve.
Approve. Aye. Okay.
Minutes are approved. Great. Thank you,
Thank you.
John. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, so going on to remarks, I had wanted to do sort of a lightning round of introductions, and I didn't do it at the beginning of the meeting because I thought we should just jump right into the plan of conservation and development while we had John and Steve here. But if everyone's game, I thought we'd just go around and do a very quick summary of ourselves for the new commissioners and for each other. I'm going to start so you can think, you have a few seconds to think about it. And I'm just going to say that, yeah, I grew up in Madison and I'm a graduate of Daniel Hand High School, left, raised my kids outside Boston, and then came back in 2008. Professionally, I worked for 40 years as a conservator of cultural heritage, which meant working in museums and on museums mostly on the East Coast and on archaeological sites around the Mediterranean. So, but technically I'm officially retired. Phew, done. Okay, who wants to go next? I'm gonna do what I see on my board
go,
here.
Karen.
Okay, John Morgan, go ahead.
Yeah. So I've been in Madison now 25 years. I grew up in West Haven, been in Connecticut, went to University of Connecticut. I'm a Connecticut kind of born and bred. I've been working in Hartford and various insurance companies for the last 40 plus years. I am within about 6 weeks of actually retiring. So I'll have a lot more time to spend reading documents and getting smart on all these things. So love Madison. Raised our kids here. My wife has a business here, and we loved the choice we made back in the late 90s to come here.
Thank you. Bob Reinhardt, you're
Sure.
next.
So we've been here now 5 years, just over 5 years. And I was born on Long Island. So just let you all know, this is the better side of Long Island. Don't worry about it.
So,
Much better.
Someone say.
So, but I grew up in Long Island, and we've lived in New Jersey, California, New Jersey, Long Island. Said we would never go back, but we did. Then Pennsylvania, and finally Connecticut. So we've landed here, and we're not ever leaving. We love it here. But I'm an engineer by training and nature, so that's why I ask all the questions. To me, it's just about getting data and information so I can process it. I work in Guilford at a med device company.
thanks. Janet, you're next on my screen.
Oh, okay. Well, let's see. After retiring from a 30-year career in television broadcast news and news anchor and reporter, I started my own marketing business. And after missing people a lot, I got my real estate license about 7 years ago, and I've been selling real estate since then. So not really retired. I keep saying I'm going to, but I won't. I've only lived in Madison for 1 year. I was in Essex for 14 years before that, and West Hartford before that. I've been in Connecticut since '84 and love Connecticut. Can't get me out of Connecticut, but I love Madison.
Great, thanks. And going clockwise on my screen, Elliot, you're next.
Been a Madison resident now for 17, 18 years. I am director of operations for a solar company based in Brantford. And my wife, Maria, works in the town hall. Aaron probably knows her very well. And I've been on the commission now for somewhere between 7 and 8 years.
But who's counting? Thanks, Elliot. Okay, Michael Buda. I think you might be muted.
No,
You
still.
muted yourself, but we couldn't hear you when you were presumably unmuted, so.
I'm not hearing Michael.
Mike's not working.
Your microphone isn't working, Michael.
How about now?
That's good.
Yes.
There we go. I actually hit the button on near my belly. So I'm also an engineer, retired. My motto is being retired is every day is Saturday. So I'm happy to be here with you guys. I grew up on Long Island also. I joined a company, it was called AIL, and they transported me all over the place. I was on aircraft carriers. I worked on the space shuttle program. I lived out in Edwards Air Force Base. I moved to Houston. I moved to White Sands, New Mexico, and then finally Cocoa Beach, Florida. I met my wife through a blind date set up by my parents, of all things. She was in Boston. I met her, we got together, and I moved up to Boston, joined a company there. We have a son, he lives up in the Boston area still, but my wife's family is from Connecticut down here. And we moved here about 4 years ago and have been enjoying it tremendously. That's my story.
Great, thanks. John Dusa?
Sure. I grew up in Guilford, graduated from Guilford High, and I'm a financial advisor and non-practicing attorney with an office in Guilford. My wife and I moved to Madison with our 2 teens in 2018, and so far so good. And this has been an excellent experience so far. I'm looking forward to the next 3.5 years of my term, at least.
Okay. And if you can survive 2 teens, that's great.
That's great.
We're there with you. Okay, Bob O'Connor, I think. And then Aaron, we're saving you the best for last.
Yes. Okay, well, I left Connecticut in 1963 when I graduated from Greenwich High School. What got me back here is I attended my high school reunion in October of 2013, and I ran into my prom date, whom I hadn't seen in literally 50 years. She had gone off and was Phi Beta Kappa at Wellesley. She's still much smarter than I am, but we're back and we're doing much better than when we were 18, and we're currently married, actually. What I did for a living, I am Professor Emeritus of Political Science from Penn State, and I left there in 2001 to take a job as a program director at the National Science Foundation in the Social Science Directorate. I run a program called Decision, Risk, and Management Sciences. My Nobel Prize winners are the guy from Yale with the DICE climate model, and Eleanor Ostrom, the environmental decision making for the commons, and a couple of economists, behavioral economists, and a psychologist, Danny Kahneman. So I support research. I'm like Santa Claus, except most people get coal rather than an award, so I'm not very popular. So, but I'm delighted to join this group. I'm going to learn a lot.
Thanks. All right, Aaron, a quick bio and then whatever else you wanted to talk about for your remarks.
Sure. I am also a Madison resident and have been serving as town planner for almost a year and a half now. I live in town, my husband and 4 children and 2 dogs, and previously worked for the town of Guilford. And prior to that, and after graduation, for the city of Norwalk. I have a biology background, actually, environmental science, and found my way to being a planner. So that's it. And I'm here hopefully to educate you and keep you on track and help you make the decisions that you need to do. So feel free to always reach out to me when you have questions. And I appreciate it when you do.
Great. So did you want to, speaking of education, did you want to talk about training?
Yes. So additionally, in this act of Public Act 2129, there is a requirement that became effective as of January 1st, 2023 for continuing ed for those serving as zoning commissioners, planning commissioners, or zoning board of appeals members. And so over the next year, you're responsible for accruing 4 hours of continuing education training. And a portion of that needs to be related to social equity or affordable housing type subject matter. And so in light of this new statutory requirement, there have been various organizations who have kind of joined together to provide these opportunities for commissioners. And so one of those is the Connecticut Bar Association land use training program, which Bob had briefly mentioned earlier. It is a Saturday. I believe it's March
11th, I think.
It's the 11th, right? It's a virtual, it's a virtual event, and it's an all-day event. There is a $40 fee, I believe, or $45 fee. I have a PDF flyer that I will email out to you. It's highly encouraged that you attend this. This would essentially satisfy your entire continuing ed requirements. And as new commissioners, it's a wonderful overview of everything you need to know and probably more. It used to be held in person with lunch, and it was actually a really nice social event as well to be able to interact with other municipalities and other commissioners. During COVID, it went virtual and it was successful, so they're going back to virtual. You would, however, in registering for the event, receive it's basically an 1.5 inch thick guidance document, a book that the Bar Association would mail to you, and it's a great reference tool. Goes through, as I always say, when you're a combined commission, when you're wearing your planning hat versus your zoning hat, and it takes you through. It also explains to you what the role of the Inland Wetlands Agency is, the role of the Zoning Board of Appeals, understanding freedom of information or environmental interveners, and all these other things that may come up during your proceedings with applications. So that the process that we're going to do for that is individual registration, that you would individually register with the Bar Association, pay the fee, you attend the seminar, and the town will reimburse you for your fee. I unfortunately cannot pay upfront for everybody, as there have been times that we have generously paid for commissioners who have failed to show so we would like to see that you are indeed vested in attending this, and I will happily reimburse you. There are also, if you don't panic if you can't make that event, it is great and useful, and the documents to have on hand are very useful, but it's something that can be shared with you. There's also other opportunities that will come along during the year. Yukon Clear is a great example, and I think at this point it's probably only Bob Reinhardt who I have not met with individually yet to welcome and give you some of these links. There's basic commissioner training classes. There are also advanced options in there. Connecticut Conference of Municipalities is creating this working website where they're posting all types of online training opportunities. Most of them are free and most of them are recorded. I've also been in contact with some of my colleagues in other municipalities. Definitely the town of Old Saybrook. Town planner there, Chris Costa, has initiated training programs where she's inviting other municipalities to attend hybrid to their meetings. And those will be recorded and posted on the website. So even if you can't make an event, these are great. We're just pooling these resources so that in the future, for your continuing ed, if you need a refresher course, and also as we get new commissioners, we have now links of all sorts of relevant information for you. So we're essentially creating a training library throughout the state, which is great because there are so many, as you kind of learned at our last meeting, zoning isn't always easy and you make some really important decisions. So being educated and knowing where there are risks or potentials for appeals is great. What I'm going to do, I think, in tracking this, the statute, there are no penalties prescribed in the statute for this training. The way that it is mandated is that the land use, the commission's report to the selectman's office, the legislative body. So essentially, we're going to be tracking on a spreadsheet and providing that annually to the selectman's office for training. The first year, I believe, is a 4-year mandatory training, and then it's on a every other year basis moving forward. So that would be great. And opportunities, it doesn't distinguish between a paid sponsored event or simply an educational session that I schedule with you or our land use attorney schedules with you. So this can really vary. So don't feel intimidated that we're not going to be able to make these requirements of the 4 hours. I think we'll do self-reporting, and I'll just set up a spreadsheet for us. And if you get an opportunity in your convenience to watch something, just as Bob had, then that's great. And we'll check the box and move forward. And if you're ever looking for, I'll always share the link of activities and available programs for you. If you're looking for something specifically, you can reach out to me. But we're just getting that started this month.
What I did today was free, and there were 220 commissioners on the Zoom, so it was fairly widely attended.
Yeah, and those will also
because
be
they would give you a
recorded,
scenario
right?
and said, is this a COI or not? And they weren't obvious.
Yeah, and they are being recorded, so you can watch them in the future too.
That's what I thought they were. I think that's the goal,
Yeah,
is to
this was
try to
fun.
get everything recorded so we don't have to have these special
That's, yeah.
sessions. And the attorneys who are presenting in this series that Bob is watching, it's also through Yukon Clear. Those are all Bar Association attorneys, land use attorneys. Many of them take part in our Connecticut Association of Zoning Enforcement Officials training and certification process, and they will participate in this Bar Association all-day training on Saturday, March 11th. So they really know what they're talking about and have been doing this for many years in training and are great resources. for us.
Aaron, when will you be able to send something out about that?
The,
The March 11th event?
oh, I'll send it out tomorrow morning.
Great. Oh, okay,
I received the PDF online. At first, I only had a printed copy, but I did receive the PDF from the Bar Association. And registration will close on February 15th, I believe. So you have a couple weeks to get that completed.
Okay.
Karen, will you send out links to the other options, the other training options also?
Yes, I'll send the link to the website that will be updated regularly. And I'm also, I have to kind of put this together a little bit. I'd like to share, and I might just put it on our website, a link to some of the other resources that we have. At least I'll share the Old Saybrook ones that are up. We unfortunately had a conflict this evening, but there was a recent floodplain, just a general introduction to what floodplain ordinance and regulations are. And the state's floodplain manager, Diane Ivkovic, came down and did a nice basic training session with the Planning Commission in Old Saybrook. And that, you know, nothing too high level, but just a great, you know, basics, so you know what that means.
Okay, cool.
Great.
right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Any other questions or topics to discuss? Are we okay being back in Zoom?
So yeah, that was a little
Yeah.
sort of a we adjusted after our last meeting. We had some technical challenges with the hybrid availability in meeting room A. The OWL is somewhat it's a little too small for meeting room A, and we tried it, and we had some technical challenges of getting our mirroring onto our second television actually in the building, in that room as well. And it was challenging for the commissioners who were present in person to see some of those documents on that screen. So just to give you an overview, when prior to COVID, when the commission met, they were in-person meetings. Typically, the commission does not have screens, computers. There were no computers or television, or excuse me, phones present at the table during meetings. All of the information during these proceedings are expected to be public. So what the applicant is, you know, looking at, and the public is looking at, it's expected that that's the same as what the commission is looking at. When you introduce personal computers and screens into that process, there's that question of whether or not commissioners are looking at the same thing that the public is. Here in this setting where we do screen sharing, it's easy to ensure that.
Wait a second, it's easy to ensure that. I have my other laptop
know.
on. You have
Well,
no
there's an
idea.
How do they
expected-
know?
There's an
which
expected
event I'm looking at,
behavior.
Not to mention other things that I could be looking at.
So that's something that, as part of your training and knowing as commissioners, there is this due process that is expected in a regulatory commission. And so in that sense, anything that's entered into the record needs to be accessible to the applicant for the ability to review, to counter, to comment on. If you are looking at, and Bob Reinhardt brought up a great example of, you know, I want to look at Google Maps. I want to see this a little bit clearer. Well, that can be considered ex parte information during a hearing if you're doing private research on your own. So what's important is if you're looking up a statute or you're looking up other information, that's where at the hearing, you can ask, you know, I'm not familiar where this is. Are you able to share an aerial photo or Google Maps onto, you know, where we can see and kind of orientate ourselves to this particular site? And that way it's here, it's in the public. We're all looking at the same thing. The applicant can look at it as well. The public can see it. And there's no question of especially when it comes to your decision making, that you're not relying on information that was not part of the record for the application. And that's what's most
So
important.
you're making a really good case for in-person hearings.
I agree.
Well,
That's
so
what
there's,
matters
I-
most, because then you can see
there's a
what people are
twist,
adding and
you know,
not
we do
anything
have
else.
to consider the language. So the statutes were amended regardless of emergency provisions, you know, on a state level. The statutes have been formally amended to permanently allow either virtual, hybrid, or in-person meetings. And the language that was included in this new law states that should there be any member of these public agencies, meaning one of your, as a board member, that wishes to attend remotely, that has to be made available. So if any
We all
of,
agree on that. That's not a.
well, but if any of you are not wanting to attend in person, then we have to have the technology to be able to have the hybrid. It doesn't mean that the public has to participate via hybrid, but the commissioner needs to be able to participate remotely. When we discussed this in December, looking forward to our 2023, there was a general desire to get back in person for some of these reasons of interacting, seeing the public. But there were also commissioners who wanted to stay remotely. So the hybrid option, perhaps I was a little premature in trying this, but we wanted to give it a chance and see how, knowing that we had this OWL technology, to see if it worked and that we could accommodate both. As much as we liked being in person, there were things about remote meetings that really were appealing to the public, where they didn't have to leave their homes. They could
That bothers me.
hop on and be more, more involved in town government. Not have to hire a babysitter to come to a meeting or things of that nature.
No one's
also-
arguing against having hybrid meetings. I think
What's that?
everyone is in heated agreement that we would keep a hybrid meeting. The question is, why can't we also have live in-person meetings for those of us who much prefer to be face-to-face?
Well, so the
You can't
challenge
just have one
is
thing
with
be
the
fixed.
hybrid technology. So, and that's where we have some shortcomings here. So using the OWL and in the setup that we have a very large commission, which is different than our Board of Selectmen. And so we're spreading out in the same room, but we're at either end of the table with our staff and commission members. The microphone of the OWL does not pick up everybody. After our last meeting, I did receive comments from those in attendance virtually who couldn't hear some commissioners. Instead, in using the paper plans, there was a lot of rustling. The rustling of paper tended to overpower some of the actual
Voices.
of commissioners. There are some other challenges. One, just from a staff perspective, one, we had technology issues where the screen wasn't sharing onto the other second large television in meeting room A. Additionally, commissioners sat at the table and said, well, we can't see that. So we want to look at our own screens where we can zoom in. Well, I did confer with town council, our land use attorney, and they advised not to have personal computers or tablets during the meeting for the reasons that we spoke of earlier. So in that sense, you're looking at paper or the screens in the room, the actual televisions in the room for viewing. And that being said, then I, as staff, am the only one who serves as IT as well, and your staff, for hosting these meetings. And so typically when we were all virtual, I would sit in my office and have multiple monitors where I can have documents up and choose when to screen share. as we're in the room, one thing that I found was a little quirky, I think, is having my laptop plugged directly into the televisions. And so everybody who's in the room is looking at my computer and every screen and watching the behind the scenes shuffling of trying to screen share documents for you. It was a little clunky, to be honest, and not ideal. So my biggest concern is that, one, the commission felt some commissioners felt they couldn't see the meeting materials, the documents for the applications clearly. And also the public had trouble hearing. And so those are the biggest, when you're a regulatory board, it has to work for everyone to be able to hear what's being said during the hearing, to clearly see the documents that are being shared, and have an opportunity to be heard. So that, I think, to ensure that we are checking all of those boxes, the virtual does make that happen. I think moving forward, we may be able to get to a better hybrid system. I thought about using the Hammonasset room, which has a higher end virtual, a camera system where the room itself is an attendee on Zoom, and there's a large screen behind where the commission would sit, and there's a monitor, another television, essentially. I'm not sure that would work really. I guess it's a feedback from the commission. How important is it for you? Can you see the screens, and where are you comfortable in that? I think the sound would be better for those attending virtually to hear you in that room. I think the sound system is better. And, it just to make sure that when you're looking at paper plans and talking about them on the table, that needs to be screen shared simultaneously, so that those attending virtually are seeing what you're looking at. So just logistically, there are some challenges in that. Another option is, if the commission wanted to go all in person. Again, we would likely revert back to requiring more paper copies of applications. Right now, we require 2 because the PDFs are what we share and what we post online for everyone to view. When you're sitting in person, the old days, I should say, we created packets for the commissioners ahead of the meeting. Everybody got a copy of every application. You have printed staff reports, draft resolutions, things of that nature came in a packet. We'd either deliver them or mail them. Mailing, became costly, and it becomes costly in printing costs for the applicant to run that many sets of full-size documents. And then it also became wasteful, because often commissioners would say thanks and leave, and we'd have stacks and stacks of plans left in the meeting for recycling. But that's typically how we used to do presentations during hearings. We'd have, your own personal sets of the meeting materials. It's a lot of staff copying. And then the presenter would have a display board, and come with an easel and speak. And if people in the public wanted to attend, they would come up and look at the board, or come in ahead of the hearing and look at the paper copies of the drawings. So I know there were concerns, and I think some of our commissioners, we have new commissioners from what we had in December as well. So maybe you want to revisit this if you're comfortable, in sort of an interim situation until we kind of work out some of these technical kinks to stay virtual. That would be staff's recommendation, at least at this point. The other question I had actually was, I felt a little bit that the technology or the sharing or, the juggling of both in person and those attending in person and the virtual attendees of the hearing or presenters who were virtual, and just interacting with each other, not distracting isn't the word that I'm thinking of, but I felt like it took away where you are such a new commission that whatever I can do to make it simpler to kind of understand and get our points across of what your roles are or what you need to be considering without having other kinds of distractions, I thought would be most helpful for you. But maybe that's being presumptuous. Maybe you didn't see any of those concerns at the last meeting.
Aaron, I understand the problems with the hybrid meeting, and you're right. I mean, you probably end up have to go just all person, face to face, or do this because the hybrid wasn't working unless you have maybe the other room would work. But to me, there's like this. I'm a little befuddled on how to move forward and do the work. So if we take any one of the issues that came in front of the commission last time at the public hearing, any one of those, and when I looked at it, there were 6, 7, 8 different documents, all fairly dense. And I had the opportunity to look at almost all of them, but I can't memorize them. So now I've got a general sense of what might be available to look at, and it may have created some questions. Now I'm stuck because I'm in a meeting and I'm trying to think about what the right answer and the direction to go and the questions to ask. But I can't look at anything because I can't look at anything electronically, and we don't have the paper.
You mean attending in person or
virtually? How am I supposed to look? I don't know how to do the job without the access to the documents. And listening says I don't have them unless I ask you to pull it up because I'm not allowed to look at it offline.
I printed out a lot of copies of stuff.
Yeah, I don't have
Not
the
every page.
I'm cheap. It costs too much paint, too much paper, too much ink, and I'm right, it's a waste. I'll print it out, I'll look at it, I'll throw it away. I tend to take PDFs electronically and take notes on a PDF.
right?
I mean, I take notes on this. It's an electronic notebook.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I'm just struggling. There's a logical inconsistency in the argument, which I'm stuck on. I understand that
I agree.
transparency and due process. I'm fully on board with that. I love the idea of everything being transparent. It makes life a lot easier. But we're living in 1960 rules in 2023.
Yep, I agree.
I
don't know how to fix it. I know you can't fix it, and you're telling us how to make it what it is. So I'm not complaining to you. I'm just trying to.
I think, from what I can say, as far as documents in the hearing or the presentation, it is important for the commission when you're hearing, what a project is, or if you have a question, to speak up and say, hold on, can we go back to this and look through, and that's that discussion or those questions or wanting to see this information or go through that report that was presented to you or the traffic report, can we focus on this page and go through it and ask your questions? That is what you're supposed to do.
Right, but I don't know which document to reference.
And how do we do that virtually? I mean,
That's the part. How do I know which document to ask you to go back to if it hasn't been presented, but I've had a chance to read it in preparation? Or maybe I shouldn't be.
What are you referring to, like my staff reports or
No.
the application
The
documents?
application packets. They're all version controlled. They're on the town website. You just click through them. It's a lot of great information.
Really, those application documents should be presented to you as part of the application. Maybe a drainage report, they're not going to read verbatim a drainage report, but
Soil types or something.
an engineer would typically tell you, walk you through the drainage proposal. And maybe we haven't had, I'm trying to think, maybe we haven't had a real, a larger application or a more detailed application.
a new application that they're presenting all the
And
documents.
our last meeting was your first one, Bob?
Yes.
So maybe that's why, but that information should be presented to you.
So-
And, you know, an introduction in a hearing, it's, you know, the applicant's agent or the applicant would typically introduce themselves, introduce the project. The engineer would walk you through the site development plan. Architects would pull up the architectural drawings and walk you through the whole thing. Traffic engineers typically will come and present and walk you through what their existing conditions and proposed findings.
Maybe I just need to go through one from start, but I'm sorry, I'm going to ask a lot of questions.
No, that's,
Okay. I think what was tough at the last meeting, the hybrid meeting too, Aaron, was the volume of paperwork we had in front of us, which not only did it make a lot of noise, but I had trouble finding things, which was part of why there was so much shuffling right in front of the owl. And I was probably, blasting through any conversation that was being had or any dialogue. But, it was a tough meeting for us to try as our first
Yeah, maybe
hybrid.
that's-
Because, it
Maybe
was
that's
like
one of my
20
problems.
pages of paperwork, which we've never had before. And, or at least I haven't. Elliot, you've had the paper packets in the past, but I think it was a new experience for us. And I also, Bob, to sort of back you up and kind of questioning some of the logic is that I agree that, I understand what town council is saying, but I also don't see what the harm is in us looking online at documents versus looking at a paper document on the table even, where nobody's seeing that either. And
Yeah,
you don't know what
it's-
I'm
Right.
shuffling through or what book I'm
Yeah,
looking.
it's the I think at the core of this is just like, I work in a highly regulated industry and it's all about version control. You can't reference an out-of-date version. So there's ways of doing that. And maybe it's just something that we need to catch up with. Maybe it's something that's done elsewhere, but the idea that applicant 2233, here's a list of the most recent documents on a secure site. That's the only thing you promise. It's the only thing you're looking at, but allows you then to follow along. Because even
Yeah.
tonight, when Steve did a great job, but in the presentation, for me to look at it and look at you, I have it on a small screen. I'm following along on a printout so I can see it. And I can ask questions. I'm just following along, word by word, what he's doing, but I've got a 23-inch screen that allows me to see everything.
Yeah.
And so that is technically, I'm just finding out now, not technically allowed. And so I shouldn't be doing that. But it allows me to engage better.
well, in that situation, we weren't in a regulatory application. So for discussions in that sense, it is okay. But a lot of the statutes and things, these evolve out of case law, and
Yeah.
really when we have appeals taken, and you think of controversial applications or things where appeals have been taken during COVID, during the pandemic, some of those have not been heard and decisions have not been made. And so we may see some of this case law evolve and, but we're
with
at
you.
this point here
Yeah,
that
I'm completely with you. I'm not going to
it's-
fight it. You said it's
is.
based on the law. I'll follow it. I'm just trying to I'm picking out ways of maybe making it better, and maybe as the case law evolves, we'll have the opportunity. But okay,
It's hard,
I'm
it's
with you.
hard for us to do our job. I go back
Yeah.
to what Bob said. It's
Yeah.
hard for us to do what you want us to do when we can't reference these material. Even tonight, I couldn't look at anything because I hadn't printed it out because I just got it at the last minute. I've been working all day. So I got home in time to go to the meeting, but I hadn't seen any of this stuff. So it's very, it's like working with one hand behind your back. You feel like you don't have the information you need to have. And if we do all of our meetings like this, I'm going to really feel like that at our next meeting.
I think there's nothing in the regulations, unless I misunderstand, that if someone's going on making a presentation and they're referring back to something we just looked at, but it's no longer up on the board because they've gone on, But in thinking through what the person's saying, we want to come back and take a look at it while they're going on to something else. We can't do that. And that just doesn't make sense.
It doesn't mean that you can't look at the information, that's presented, or, in making your decisions. The application information is attached to the agendas and typically is posted ahead of time. So yes, there is an expectation to some extent that you do a little homework ahead of the meetings to read through and familiarize yourself with the
Yes,
application.
and I
Mhm.
do,
Yeah.
but I don't print everything out and have it
No,
beside
and
me.
I don't think you need to print it out. I mean, you can, but it's expensive and it's wasteful. And it's the reason why the town hasn't required these number of copies anymore. Having the documents online is a huge benefit, both to the public and to the commissioners. And that's new. That never happened ahead of COVID. And I don't think, even though, and it's not required by the statutes, but we continue to provide that because I think it's great for you to be able to look at that and save them. If you received an application and you just kind of thinking this through, if you sat and you brought your packet to an in-person meeting, you would be allowed to look through and review those documents and ask a question when it comes time. I don't think anybody is saying you can't do that.
Right.
The question and the concern is that when you are, the optics of this, when you are sitting at an in-person meeting, no one can see your screen. No one knows that you're looking at a document. You could be, looking up something else. And
Right.
so
Right.
that test, we don't have case law on that. We know hybrid never existed before. So this is new and it is kind of uncharted territory. To be cautious, we've been advised not to do it, unless you can provide evidence to the public and the applicant that we're all looking at the same thing. So when I think that through, I think, well, then everybody has to log into Zoom sitting at the meeting so
Right.
that everybody can see that we're screen sharing. Well, then at that point, why are we in person if we're
Yeah.
all just reliant on the screen in front of us that all of us are shared? It's not easy. And maybe the laws and how it was updated, this started as a result of trying to continue business and continue operating during a pandemic. And now it's, people understood the convenience of it, but I'm not sure it's all been thought out, and the implications for local governments and the financial burdens of getting this the technology to provide for this and while staying legal or trying to prevent appeals of application. You don't know, this could very well, if you get a complaint of somebody saying, oh, I think they had a different screen, or I think they were on their phone, or are they texting someone else in the commission? I mean, all these things could be happening, and it is. I don't have all of the answers. I just know that
But
the
nobody
hybrid
checked the
adds an
papers
extra
I
element
brought
of
to the
complication.
meeting,
What's
The
that, Bob?
papers I had at my desk the last meeting, did anybody go through those to make certain I didn't have anything that was inappropriate, that I didn't, Google some other map of downtown and, if you want to be hypothetical, you could have the same charge that those decisions last time were invalid because we didn't know what Elliot had on his desk, or we didn't check that some of those papers Carol's was rustling weren't her favorite recipes for something she was checking out, or some contraband she was given related to the Winter Club.
Stolen antiquities.
You can,
I mean, I don't think, the
I don't see
process
why
of
you're any more
in-person
vulnerable.
meetings and packets goes back a long, long time. I mean, Elliot, you've been on the commission for years. And I mean, you received paper copies, and I'm just curious, you attended virtually. What were your thoughts? I know you were one of our commissioners who was requested to have the ability to attend virtually. So how did that go for you?
I just felt like going through plans when we were in person, we would get an 11 by 17 print of a full-size blueprint, which is basically almost completely not readable, any of the text on there. So you're relying on looking at a poster board that is 15, 20 feet across the room that the architect or engineer is presenting on. And I find reading the prints and site plans and stuff like that on my screen, where I could zoom in and see things a lot clearer, is beneficial. Compared to doing it in person. And when we did do it in person, we would get packets in the mail a couple days before the meeting that was about this thick, 3 inches thick of paperwork.
That's crazy.
And I just overall, I've experienced the Zoom platform now for coming up on almost 3 years, and I definitely find it to be easier to work with. And I also find that, or seemed that, there was a lot more public participation than there would be in the fishbowl. There were several meetings that we had where there were, looking through the attendee list, there's 110, 120 people on the meeting. We never had anything close to that in person. And there was definitely a lot more participation through some of these hot topic items that we heard throughout the pandemic. So, I mean, me personally, outside of my hearing impairment, which, with hearing aids, I could hear this platform, going through the Zoom platform, I could have it streamed directly to my hearing aids, which allowed me to hear everything compared to the echo in the fishbowl, which is a lot more difficult to understand everything that's going on. And then with the hybrid, in the last meeting, there was actually towards the end of it, which I can't remember which thing we were looking at, but Aaron, you were trying to share a map, and the map was not coming up on the hybrid. So I couldn't see the map that you were going through. I think it might have been the dog park possibly, but there was one of the maps that wasn't coming through. And then the presenter for the Bank Boston, Bank Boston, I'm dating myself there, Bank of America. The presenter for Bank of America, there was a tremendous echo coming through on the Zoom platform for him speaking, where all the other presenters through Zoom were extremely clear and very easy to understand. But on the Bank of America one, I did have a lot of difficulty because there was an echo.
Yeah, he was loud.
But in my personal preference is the Zoom option or hybrid option, but I'm one of 7, 8.
Well, I think we should think about the technology and maybe try out the Hammonasset room, Aaron, as just a practice session or something, and see how it works. But I also feel that we need to catch up with technology that advanced during the pandemic and made our lives so much better, and that if we can keep those and incorporate them into our meetings one way or another. I don't know. I mean, we have to rely on legal counsel, and there is no case law yet about what somebody might have been looking at on their screen in a Zoom session or not in a Zoom session. I don't know.
Would it make sense to do another hybrid for like our next planning meeting, where there's no public hearings going on?
You mean try the Hammonasset room for
Yeah,
that?
trying out the Hammonasset room set up as a hybrid for the planning meeting.
Yeah, we can do that. It doesn't eliminate the issues as far as everyone in the room seeing, all the behind the scenes kind of screen sharing and computer, that kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
Mhm.
so that's the only still downfall that and really the only way to deal with that is to have an additional staff person who is responsible for hosting the meetings, while staff can be there to actually staff. That's something that changed during COVID, is that now staff who used to sit and participate in the meetings and guide the commission is also serving as IT and room moderator and and screen sharer and things of that. And that's really changed our roles also as staff, and some of it's not as complicated. I know the one question we had was with the webinar feature versus a meetings feature. And I've used both. When I worked for the town of Guilford, we did not have the webinar feature. The town didn't purchase that. And we only used meetings. And so everyone was in attendance, for the meeting, and you had to try to lock down. You couldn't allow screen sharing because you were afraid of, someone just coming into the meeting, being able to screen share whatever they wanted to. And so that was the responsibility of staff. We were the only ones who can screen share. So we ended up, working with the applicant and sharing all of the information they wanted to share and kind of coordinating back and forth. The webinar feature, one of the benefits of that is that you could see everybody who was in the meeting and know who else was in attendance at the meeting. That's something that I find challenging with the webinar feature, is that when you're an attendee, it's just you watching the screen. You don't know who else is here, and you don't see anyone. It's almost as though you're watching this just live streaming on YouTube or on television. And so I found that felt a little disconnected. Anytime I've been an attendee at a meeting, even attending Board of Selectmen, you just sit there. I thought, who else is at this meeting? You just you're just watching. And I think attendees at the hearings sometimes feel that way also. And then the practice has been that they're invited to talk during public comment period. And so you're hearing a voice and you're not connecting a face to that voice. And the other option would be then to promote anyone who has their hands raised for public comment to a panelist. And the process to do that is that staff has to, physically promote that person. They have to accept, and then there's usually a delay of, 30 seconds until they join the panel and, turn their camera on and unmute. So that would be the process if you want people to be able to be seen during public comment. That was something that Bob had mentioned as well. And I agree. It's a little
Less than ideal.
It's not perfect.
No,
We've been for a long time, and we've made advancements in this, and some things have gotten smoother, but we still have that risk, when appeals are very costly for the town, tens of thousands of dollars when someone takes an appeal of a land use decision to Superior Court. And that's where we have to balance, what is the risk of that? Do we want to push the envelope and leave ourselves susceptible to, that potentially being a reason for an appeal, or a supporting reason for, an appeal taken? I don't know.
Mhm.
So we'll stick with Zoom for now.
I
think
Is that
so.
what we just said? My guess, I think one thing we have a consensus on is that we're not going to just do in person with no hybrid. option, that the choices between trying hybrid to work out the technical difficulties or going entirely Zoom. Am I right about that? That's our choice?
I agree. I think,
Mhm.
you know, the public access to the virtual meetings and for professionals to be able to attend, you know, on behalf of their clients virtually, and you know, we're required to allow remote access for commission members already. But I feel
think
like
it's not an
it's
option.
hard to go back, you know, and maybe that will change. You know.
Well, no one's putting forth a motion that we do pure in person only, if I'm right.
I didn't get.
But the choice is, do we want to try to fix these technical issues and do a hybrid with some of us in the room and some of us at home, virtual, or just do entirely Zoom? I'd like to try to fix the technical issues because I think the advantages of being in the same room together are just enormous.
Well, you won't all be
The
together.
majority view, and that's okay. I'd like to at least try to fix these technical issues.
Aaron, is there any chance that you could get another staff person to help with the
Yeah.
mechanics?
That's what's really needed. Let's get an IT person in on this stuff. I'm serious. I'm shocked that.
Just
that you have
asking.
to do this.
I don't.
You got your
think
answer.
that- Clearly, no position has been budgeted for a hybrid meeting. And I think some of these things have evolved. Some of these concerns haven't come up in other boards because they're not regulatory. They're not,
Mhm.
you know, having this this due process that's expected in a land use proceeding. So we're kind of, you know, treading the way here for change and figuring out what might work and what doesn't.
Aaron, isn't this a question for every other town in Connecticut?
Other towns are struggling with it too.
Yeah,
Well,
it is.
so
That's
it's-
exactly what our attorney said. He goes, it's challenging. Hybrid is really hard. And that's why a lot either go one way or the other because
I thought you said it's mandated that we can't go one way or the other. We have to have a hybrid option.
no, you can have virtual, you can have in-person, or you could have hybrid. However, if you have an agency member or, you know, a board member who wants to attend remotely, that is mandatory, that we have to provide that ability. So you either have a consensus or, you know, and then, you know, in making your consensus, I think you really do need to weigh the benefits of having public participation.
Mhm. Yeah, you
Right.
need to
It's
be
got-
hybrid at least.
You gotta have a hybrid. You have to have a
Yeah.
hybrid.
Yeah, you have to. Otherwise, no one will come.
So we gotta fix the technology. And we don't look at our laptops.
I have an idea. Let me look at it. I'll annoy Aaron later.
Go, Bob.
We'll brainstorm.
I got an idea. I'll come by.
This man's an engineer.
You guys brainstorm. We welcome any new suggestions.
Engineers are good at this stuff.
It's a problem. I want to fix it. No problem.
Good.
Yeah, that's what you guys do. That's why
I thought I fixed stuff too, but I guess not.
I just criticize.
I think it was good to have this conversation, but right. I think that for now we'll stay with Zoom, and then if we can figure out a solution for our other issues, that'd be great. Does that sound good?
Hmm.
I'd like
Sure.
to actually head toward adjournment if we could.
Sure. Why not?
Unless there's further conversation. Yeah. Could I have a motion to, or was that, did you want to say something? John?
No. No, I move to adjourn.
I was moving to adjourn.
Okay, great.
This ran very late.
So we have two motions or a motion and a second. And on that note, all in favor of adjournment.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for these
Thanks,
conversations.
guys. You're great.
Thank you.
And Aaron, thank you for
Had some
helping us
fun
understand
times.
this.
Thank you, Aaron.
Good night.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Good, Aaron.